Some Voice by W.S. D. Piero. Past the silky gondola holes, arcaded in the boatyard, we walked that afternoon to our favorite grubby campo. Empty, except for cats and one plane tree with bench. We loved it so much. We walked just to be there, imagining sometime we'd spend the night. The little hotel, its frank lantern, its dim sign, dimmer by day, we'd remember just like that. The tree's patchy shades worked down your arm as it pointed up, over there, locating the voice, its open window, the soprano scales tipped down to us. All life is hidden life. Don't believe everything you hear. To us. Or not to us. Her voice fell into that year, then 10 more. Routine practice doesn't call to anyone, it simply falls through footbridges, black holes, and plane tree. When we went back, the singing wasn't there for us. We take what's given and work with that. The rest is grace. Some Voice by W.S.D. Piero. Welcome. Hello. We are streaming and evidently talking about poetry. Hello, Alicia Lore, and hello, Nikki J01. Lovely humans indeed. I mean, I don't know you all. Admittedly, I can't speak to the loveliness of your humanity. But y'all write lovely poetry, so that's maybe enough, right? Hello also, I was lurking momentarily because it's 4:43 a.m. That's kind of crazy. Reminder, you can always call me Elias. Yeah, I was reading out the full names for some reason. Sometimes it's fun to say them, you know, to say "do on the grass" instead of just "do." Welcome, hello. Yeah, y'all write nice things, but I can't actually know anything about your humanity through that. And I guess to that extent, you all can't entirely really know anything about me. I mean, I talk about myself and I share my work and I wonder, right? I wonder what that means. In terms of like whether the people who look at my face online like know anything about me. This is the sort of question of like parasociality, right? But even then, right, it seems that y'all know more about me than I know about you. Because I mostly know about y'all through your poetry. And that's not really a great way to know someone, right? That's certainly like a distillation, what would you call it, it's showing very specific parts of yourself. Yeah, it's very revealing, but it reveals these like maybe dramatizations sometimes, or these idealizations, that kind of stuff, right? Interesting thoughts always, right? Yeah, you are quite lovely, Nikki. I mean, I'd imagine that you all are lovely people if you like are taking the time to sit down and like think about poetry on a regular basis and share your work and give people nice kind of feedback on their work and these kinds of things. Like you all seem quite I don't know, above, better than average, at least. um it's definitely not a breadth first search, right? Like I know things about like in reading poetry, you like learn things about someone that you are way deeper than things you would learn in like an initial conversation, right? Very different kind of stuff where I read like, I don't know. I won't call out anyone's poetry in particular, I guess. But I hear about people's like deep struggles and things, and these really tender expressions of self, and that's that's very odd, right? To lead with that, it's very odd. Hi, sleepy librarian, welcome. Uh, 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 this is my sleeve on which I keep my heart. That's maybe a poem. There's a poem there, right? Words and odds are I don't know. Words and odds are an ode to our hours of needs. I greet you all together forever. We shall enact the deed. Wow, that's assonant and alliterative, if nothing else. Words and odds are an ode to our hours of. I like our hours. This is something I really like in language. When you have like and stand and like one word contains the smaller word our hours. Um, I have a soft spot for that particular sort of um, linguistic move. It gets my brain just the right way. What I like to know, I don't think that's necessarily the direction to go to solve um the conundrum of knowing, um as this is a Twitch stream. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure lots of you all, if I knew like the people in my community in person, right? Or on a more like outside of the Twitch stream level. Like y'all are probably people I would be friends with, right? Um, but like I just don't know. It's odd, right? It's very odd. It's very odd. I don't know. Yeah. Don't be sure I'm not evil IRL. I mean, yeah, y'all might be evil. Y'all might be like terrifying. Y'all might be like horrible people, right? And that's really strange because like the internet gives us this place we can present a curated version of ourselves. And I think this curation is probably not a good thing, right? Like it I mean, this is why we get people being like ultra extremist on the internet because there's no like consequences. Um, this is why we get like I don't know, like the internet does bad things. You can say bad things, or you can only present the good things, and there's a realness to like looking in someone's eye. Um, Not to solve, but as a psychotherapy student, I'd like to know what interests you about it. Oh, that's cool that you study the brain or the emotions and all of that. Um, that is very cool. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a psychotherapeutic perspective on how we relate to each other over the internet and what that means from like the perspective of community and connection or whatever. You have a very doom and gloom view. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like some people will definitely be sharing their like doom and gloom poetry all the time, right? And and that means there are some people that like uh just be dooming and glooming, and that's like what I know them as. Um, and that's okay, That's okay. I think usually the doom and gloom shows a lot of other things underneath that. Loki, I would annoy the heck out of you. Probably. I don't know. I don't maybe not. I don't know. I don't think I get annoyed very easily. I I am annoying often actually. I say lots of really dumb things. I like even this on stream. I have this more like curated personality where I'm often saying things that are like probably trying to sound kind of like intelligent, right? Like I'm trying to present something clear and concise and educational. And in real life, I like just make noises and stim and say dumb shit, like but I don't do that on stream because like why would I do that on stream? um Not trying to have this be like me stimming with a camera on my face, right? Oh, I've long lost the chat message, but whoever shared a link to their blog the other week, I read the poem ending with something like, "Who would ever drink at an empty well?" And it was really moving. We read that one on stream. Stream had crashed by the time I read it. Oh, man. The stream had crashed. What a surprise. Um, it's been better the last few streams, at least. I can say that. I resetting the Wi-Fi like thingy definitely helps. Like just unplugging it and plugging it back in every so often. I've been doing much better about just like closing everything on my computer so it's not a CPU problem. The ice packs, so we don't overheat, and which y'all will never not make fun of me for probably. Um, yeah, I'm a formologist, extremist, poet. Not really, just that thought is a funny idea. Yeah, yeah. Uh, I mean, at times I've definitely, um, like people have asked me like where I stand like politically or from a philosophical perspective. I think it's incredibly useful, to actually like be an extremist, and that is because I think that at least a lot of like discussions or it's a lot easier to resolve like problems of beliefs when you look at like the extreme ends of things, um and there's this William Blake proverb that is sort of relates to this in his Heaven and Hell. um Trying to find it. Gotta bring up William Blake, right? um he says, you never know what is enough unless you know what is more than enough, right? And if you take a belief and you challenge it and push it to an extreme, you'll eventually find a point that goes like too far. Um, and it's only when you've gone too far that you can know like where your limit is. And I think to frame understanding within extremism is actually really valuable, because if you stick to like the center, the accepted, the Overton window or whatever, and you're not pushing outside of it, you'll never know, right? You'll never know if you don't try. Uh, you know, let's say we're thinking about like leftism. If you don't try to frame the world within the absolute extent of anarchism or authoritarian communism, right? Um, then you'll never know if that is too far for you. Not that we should be framing our views within like other people's ideological frameworks. I think it's really unhelpful to say like I'm a communist, I'm an anarchist, but they're helpful points on a map for us to think about. Um, Tangent over, right? Tangent over. Dude, this is actually read the one. Oh yeah, that's the poem we are talking about. I've seen Americans on the internet talking about social media detox from the war. Yeah, and I think that's right, concerning probably. It creeps my internal organs that a war a country is waging only means a social media detox. Yeah, right. It's really that's like really concerning, that people would say like, "Oh, this is horrifying," and it's being put on my social media feed, so I am going to like ignore it, basically, right? I'm going to tap out because it's too much for me, And that's like such an extremely out of touch position, right? To say like looking at the horrors in another place is just so bad that like I'm going to ignore it, entirely, like not considering, I don't know, how horrific that is for the people who are being bombed to the ground. Like I definitely, I'm right there with you, Ishmael. And um unfortunately, I think this is sort of a cycle that's been conditioned into the American mind, and the mind of the American consumer, where you we witness horror, right, online, and then we by being online or in an isolated space, you see that and you feel powerless because you are alone. You're not in community when you're scrolling on TikTok, right? So then you see those things and you feel alone, you feel helpless, like you can't do anything about them, right? And then there are like not obvious channels, although there are channels, but there aren't obvious channels to like make an impact or resist or like stop, this bad thing from happening. So then you like maybe feel a little bit of outrage and then like forget about it. And then every time you do that, every time you see outrage and basically ignore it, you're becoming conditioned to ignore outrage, right? And ignore the horrors going on in the world. And it pushes people into this space of, I think, isolation and helplessness. At least this is like what I've noticed, personally. And it's an extremely hard thing to fight because, I feel like in such a saturated, constant news environment, I have a memory. I wrote about this in a piece on my Substack not too long ago, maybe, where the first thing I remember distinctly seeing on the news, right, as like a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old, was like some video blurred out or whatever of like a journalist getting beheaded in like Syria, right? Because that was happening back then. It's probably, I mean, back then it's still, that stuff's still happening. Um, and that kid is helpless, right? And learns that they can't do anything about these issues. So a media environment like this creates an environment of helplessness and an inability to like desire to make change. That being said, right, the horror of that helplessness is incredibly minute compared to the horror of people who are um, experiencing that kind of suffering. And um, yeah, that's that's some thoughts. That's some of my thoughts lately. um, yeah, yeah. You're like a moon, Nikki. You have phases. Yeah, I guess so do I. I used to think about that a lot. I was big on like moon imagery for a long time. Crazy turn. Da 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 da. Oh, I was you. If you're comfortable doing so, da 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 blah 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 blah. Holy shit, that's an awesome quote. Yeah, Blake is our goat. All my friends hate the Overton window. Yes, yes, that is the correct position. The hidden Scotty. Um, out of context, by the way, but I'm making a kilo of tortellini right now. That sounds dope. What are you putting on your tortellini? Um, that's our society for you. People are removed from reality. That even war is just a social networking thing. Yeah, yeah. And that's another function of social media, right? Is it pulls us from reality, um, and even, right, the things that we are shown on social media as Americans are like already propaganda, where we have these like images that frame war as looking very video game like, and there's this rhetoric from the president that it's Operation Epic Fury and we're gonna go in and win, right? Um, like it's so, and like people do not realize like even that, even the things that they're seeing on their TikTok, um, that are horrifying are often a very, very coddled, very censored version of the truth. Um, and, I don't know enough about propaganda and empire and, sociology to know whether we're past the point of return um, in this country, and like meaningful changes is if that's possible anymore. Um, but best not to get too nihilistic about it, because then you won't try. My prime minister did only the sixth national broadcast in our country's history due to the fuel crisis that's happening because of the war. Honestly, I feel pretty ignorant to this war. Didn't realize that effectually shows my privilege. Yeah, yeah. I mean, education is probably like the first step. Like being informed is the first step to these things mattering. But yeah, for most people, it's just like my gas is expensive. Plane tickets are expensive. Oh, I hope this war ends so my gas doesn't cost $5 a gallon. Like, um, and that's not a great position. That's not a great way to frame that, right? Gulf and Turkey are basically going bankrupt because of the Hormuz blockade. I couldn't think Iran would be this successful. Yeah. Um, yeah. Feel like a boiling frog. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think it's somehow a very positive thing that they'll teach countries not to get into each other's stuff. But that might be an unpopular opinion. I mean, America should certainly be less involved in the world's affairs. Um, I think there's something that like, well, I don't know if it's the Tao or if it's Socrates, but it talks about like nations as these isolated things that don't necessarily like, uh, try to like fuck each other up and stuff. Welcome in, author Christy, and many raiders. We're having a bit of a discussion about uh, politics, current global politics. We're talking about Iran and stuff. Um, so that. But welcome in. My name is Imogen. We talk about poetry on this channel, but poetry is often philosophical, and philosophical is often political, and political is often poetry, and these things are all inseparable. So we end up in these political conversations often. Um, but basically, what happens here is people send me their poetry from our Discord server, and I read it and I talk about it and I analyze it, and we learn about how to critically think about pieces of art. So that's very cool. Need to raid and run to pick up my kid from school. I'm basically dropping the kids and running. Have a great stream. Well, thank you for the raid, author Christy. I hope you had a great stream, and to everyone else, welcome. Did I hear that April is a poetry month too? Yeah, I feel like everything's a poetry month or a poetry day. There's all these like holidays and events, but April is a National Poetry Writing Month. National Poetry Writing Month, which is like National NaNoWriMo, which is like November is maybe the one that's just for writing in general, right? November. I don't know. I don't actually know because I don't do NaNoWriMo. And I am not intending to take space, take place, take part, particularly in NaPoWriMo this year, just because like I saw today that it is, and I didn't know that was a thing until today. Um, and I'm personally not always a big fan of these like write every day kind of things. I think it puts sort of undue pressure on oneself in the writing process. These things I feel like cause a lot of people to burn out. There are like the people who do really well at this stuff and it's great for them, and then there's the people who try and burn out and it like ruins their next 2 months of writing. So if you all are going to participate in NaPoWriMo, make sure you're doing it healthily, that you're not what sort of uh, uh, imposing something dangerous on your own writing process. We don't want to be um, doing something harmful for our own art, for our own minds, for our own selves, right? Um, that's definitely an important thing as artists, right? Understood that receding is a healthy part of writing too, and just passing that along. Receding, yeah, doing less, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, and then also definitely uh, sounds like receding, reading, right? One could definitely do NaPoWriMo by reading poetry every day. Just because someone says NaPoWriMo is a month of writing a poem every day doesn't mean that that's how we have to do that ourselves. So any way that we encourage ourselves to do the thing, if it's healthy for us, is certainly good, right? Trying to get back to posting on my Insta twice a week if possible, but that's it. Social media is definitely hard. It's a whole different mindset of, right, like marketing basically. I don't personally enjoy it. Twitch is a little different, right? I just like turn it on and I yap. Doesn't feel quite the same. Yeah, you did it. It was a slog, Nikki. There was a period where I did like 3 months of like one or more poems every day. It was very useful, and then I burned out for a while, right? Um, it's therapy stuff. That's the political conversation. I think we're gonna shift from the political conversation into the poetry conversation. Y'all are welcome to keep talking about Iran and the U.S. and the Middle East, because side conversations are welcome in this classroom. But yeah, like you say, what is today's poem? I think it's reasonable to get into some poetry. And Elias, if you are still here, we are definitely going to do your poem because we started it, and then I like mentally collapsed basically. I was just tired, um, and didn't really get into it and didn't give it an honest read. So I want to finish that one before necessarily starting any others. And I will say that this poem is certainly, like, from what we did read of it, it's very good, and it is a real treat. And I'll be glad to give it an honest read if I can find where that poem is on my iPad, and then we'll put it on the screen. Okay. And I'm going to start on actually I'm going to start on a fresh version of the poem, just because that that's better for my brain, right? Start fresh. No need for any kind of rehashing what we've already done. Since there are lots of new people, we'll just look at this poem with sort of fresh eyes. Thank you for the kind words already. Yeah, of course. I think I still have my take pinned in my phone clipboard reel. Oh, the spoilers. Yeah. Okay. Work called you in early. That's tough, dude. Work is certainly a thing in late capitalist society where workers are the victims of those who have, or whatever. Something like that. This poem is "Muffins on the Way Back Home," is what it is called, and since there are many new people tuning in, I guess basically what happens is I read it and I read it again and I analyze, which is a really useless word. I think I don't like the word analyze because it has all these like I don't know. It maybe has this connotation of like the academic who's like all hoity-toity and like pushing up their glasses and taking out all the fun of all the beauty, all the life of a work. I think when this implies academic, it sort of points toward the feeling of gatekeeping, which I think some people feel about academics in poetry. But basically, right? Basically, um, what I mean when I talk about analysis is just noticing things, right? Reading a poem, pointing out the things that are exciting, that I ask questions about, that I'm unsure about, that I like, that maybe I feel weird about, or that give me emotions in my chest, you know, and and then talking about how these different things contribute to the poem and how that maybe is working as a cohesive, harmonious piece, right? That's what I mean by analysis. And of course, everyone in chat is always welcome to analyze as well, even if you have no, formal knowledge of poetry. I have no formal knowledge of poetry. I've learned all of this by doing. So when people notice things they like, when they have questions, it's really beneficial and beautiful for y'all to, you know, participate as well, right? New proposal, by the way, instead of the last one. Feel free to scribble all over it with colors if you connect dots or interpret something. Love seeing that. Yeah, I am a big fan of scribbling all over, Elias. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It's sort of odd. Like sometimes I'm in a more drawing mood. But yeah, it definitely helps me, right, understand them. So we're going to start by just reading this poem. Because how can we analyze anything without listening to it? Muffins on the way back home. I met you as a half-coffee stranger cooking in my too large kitchen. Someone I do not actually know, but it feels wrong. I do know you. There is armor we forgot we are wearing. I want to scratch it, break it down. It wasn't there in the times we talked before. S-T-O-P, I am nervous. I am anxious. I just felt your touch for the first time and your favorite music kept playing. How could you calm me with just a blow? You allowed me to move closer. Perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way, but even then, I was circling back to it, into you, again, almost unconsciously. Close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder, and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? I like you, but I do not want to burn you. Then later, your arm gently resting on my hands, stretched out between us, while I was looking for constellations and markings on your skin. Neither of us moving at all. Perhaps scared the other will move away with your hand in mine and mine in yours. Were you afraid I would leave? You seemed so very excited about the Big Dipper. Is it your favorite? I found Gemini for you, next to Jupiter. You mentioned your mother is a Gemini too. Already late, and still halfway packed for leaving, but drawn in any way we lingered for one last song. One where we could dance together just in case. And I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, and why you said you could not stay here with me. Perhaps I do know. Perhaps this is not worth rushing. Muffins on the way back home. It's a little bit lengthy for like the things we read on stream. It definitely has many words. It's kind of a big poem. And I think that's part of what had me like maybe a little overwhelmed by it last time is each of these sections I think in themselves, have this quality of completeness, right? We have these 4 different scenes going on, I would say. Maybe we'll do colors for them, since you specifically like colors, Elias. Each of these has its own feeling of completeness. And I think that's really cool. and that they all kind of stand on their own as poetic statements, but then they work together as one larger work. It has this feeling of being sort of what's a good word? Like episodic. Episodic is what all these come together. They give me that feeling that like we have this one beautiful scene, right? We have another separate scene. We have another one. We have another one. And they're placed next to each other. Juxtaposed, right? When we place different things next to each other. And I think that placement is like very, very important. It tells us a lot. It sort of creates this overarching narrative, this story. But also these are like their own little tidbits, right? And I think that's really cool. And maybe this is a way to break down a large poem like this, right? When we have something big, we can often like try to understand it better by breaking it down into chunks, right? Because then like we don't have to go back and read through the entire poem every single time when we want to try to understand it. We can say, let's look at the first part, let's look at the second part, let's look at the third, let's look at the fourth. And then once we've talked about all these, then we can talk about how they might interact, how they might be working as an overarching story. And there's some word, there's a thing in art, a kind of piece, that this makes me think about. It's called a triptych. That automatically makes a square. How do I make the square? Is that going to make another square? Wow. It's called a triptych. And a triptych is basically a single piece of art that is 3 separate like canvases or 3 separate individual pieces. And they are, it's not how you spell it, try triptych. And now it's correcting my things. Okay. A triptych. 3 separate pieces, 3 separate canvases, 3 separate items that are all placed next to each other as a single piece. You also have diptychs. You probably also have like, I don't know, maybe like I don't know what it would be for 4. But this kind of feels like it, right? Each of these things has a feeling that they could stand alone. that they could kind of be to me like their own piece, and they're placed next to each other under the label of one big piece, muffins on the way back home. Part of the feeling is maybe the title, right? The title doesn't relate specifically textually to any one of these sections, right? There's no muffins or ways back home in any of these, right? In scene one, we're talking about like waking up, after sort of like a first intimate night with someone. The second one, we're talking about a specific scene of that intimacy, moving closer, feeling unsure, right? Third one, right, we're like outside under the stars. We're seeing Gemini and Jupiter, also finding like the beautiful constellations in this person themselves, right? And then fourth one, right, we now have this like parting ways, this, leaving, right? Dancing, I don't know, maybe in this same kitchen. There is some connection between these before this other person leaves our eye, right? So none of these are about muffins on the way back home, but they have this idea. They have some of this idea of home, right, and connection and closeness and leaving and returning to someone. And I think that's part of what makes it feel like these distinct separate things under the banner of a single piece. And this is really useful, I think, just as artists, as consumers of art, where I can read this poem, and since I've spent some time in art galleries enjoying visual art, right, I have this word triptych. And there are no poems that are like inherently maybe triptychs, but I can use this framework and this idea to help me understand this piece. And that's really cool. And in the same way that we're going to look at this piece, right, when we look at a triptych, there are like ways to go about this. I can sit and I can look at one piece for some time, and I can sit here, looking at this beautiful scene and, trying to understand it and think about it. And then maybe when I get, tired of this scene, I can go over to this one and be like, wow, something entirely different is happening over here, and it's this like, I don't know, galaxy kind of colorful thing I'm just drawing at this point. And then like I can go to this piece and understand this one on its own, in its own context, and maybe this is like abstract and geometric or something, right? And then I can zoom back out and say, wow, like what is this whole piece saying as a collective work? And I think that's how we're gonna like try to understand this poem today, because it's big, and I don't want to keep rereading through the entire thing, just because that's like a lot of reading labor, right? Oh yeah, I was actually curious about the title last time. Yeah, the title is very curious. Did you write it while eating muffins? I mean, maybe, right? We can never, just by reading this, know why the author would choose to title that, especially when it's sort of disconnected from the text. Perhaps not. I will come back to your thought later on. Yeah. I feel like I'm at least a little right. It would be funny if you were. It sort of makes sense, right? Sitting, eating a muffin, writing, thinking about the last day, the past, events. Maybe this all happened within that frame of time. I like that interpretation. It's kind of fun. It places us closer to the author. So we're gonna dive into these sections, and I would like to do so out of order, I think, because this is like always an option when we read poetry, that we never have to read something like top to bottom. We can write this poem as a reader is mine, and I can read it how I would like to, in whatever order, in whatever way. And that means I can say, like, I want to talk about the third stanza first, or the fourth one. And so maybe we'll start at the end, right? Because the end sticks out to me. Uh, I I love the sentiment of the final line, right? I talk about analysis as noticing, and the last line is something that I really strongly notice. Like, I love this line. Perhaps this is not worth rushing, right? This is just something I think about in my own life often. So we'll look at this stanza. Already late, and still halfway packed for leaving, but drawn in anyway, we lingered for one last song. One where we could dance together, just in case. And I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, and why you said you could not stay here with me. Perhaps I do know? Perhaps this is not worth rushing. Oh, out of order is a very interesting. I like the way you're approaching this. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just doing it to like generally prove a point that like we can do whatever we want, and poetry doesn't have to be like top to bottom. I think this is a great poem to like illustrate that fact. Just that we can engage with it in different novel ways, and that can be more fun. um, okay, so this stanza has this. There's like there's some like tonal stuff. I words, other things that stick out to me here. Maybe that's a good place to start. And I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, and why you said you could not stay here with me. Right? These four lines also jump out to me. Right? They sort of remind me of like really really strongly of Charles Bukowski, who maybe is not a writer that many people want to be compared to. I do really like him and his poetry, but it has this sort of like there's like, it's very honest, right? And this is something to me that this poem really screams to me, from like an overarching tonal perspective, is it's very honest, right? It's sort of a unconventional thing in a poem, where like, right, this is about expressing, right, poetry, right? Poetry, we want to express something. We want to take our feelings and our ideas and take them from our own brain and our own thoughts and like put them into someone else's, right? And when we say just flat out, right, I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, right? It doesn't directly tell the reader anything, because like an understanding and a message is like something that actually tells the reader something. But sort of the fact that this is said, right? The fact that the author says, and I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much and why you said you cannot stay here with me. It has this honesty. It has this like very direct, like within the mind kind of feeling, right? It's placing us within the head of like, this thing mattered to me and this is important and I'm writing about this, and yet like it's not exactly clear why. Maybe it's because of this, right? Maybe all of this is important, right? Because it's not worth rushing. Perhaps I know. There's an uncertainty. It leaves this feeling of like openness that there's more to come, right? I think this poem like leaves potential. It leaves like room for a tomorrow, I guess. And when you say, Nikki, right, it feels extremely lived in, right? I think this makes sense. Uh because it's acknowledging that with an immense amount of care, right? What's happening today, right? This specific event that's happening here, 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 here. This feels like it's all within like a 24-hour span. Like either like one morning to the next morning, or we're talking about the same morning and then like the prior night is kind of what it feels like to me. But we're really like zooming in on something small, right? And saying this matters and that this is important and that there is care here. But also that like, I guess perhaps this is not worth rushing. Almost says to the reader, like, you know, there will be more and it will be taken slowly, and I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but it's a feeling. And I think lived in is a good word for it. I think honest is getting toward that. I think this openness, I think part of that is cast by this sort of uncertainty. Perhaps I do know, perhaps this is not worth rushing. Um, it just makes everything feel like slightly less grounded. That there's, yeah, less grounded, less grounded. Um, and we sort of do this to jump to another part, right? This is what I mean. By analyzing one thing, we can understand things about the other. In this one, right, we're talking about very concrete imagery. We'll do like purple, very concrete, arm on hand, you know, dance in the kitchen, right? Looking at markings on skin, all of this. And then at the end, we sort of expand into space, Gemini, Jupiter, distant things, untethered things, ungrounded things, literally ungrounded in space, ungrounded in uncertainty, ungrounded in the asking of questions and uncertainty with this, you know, person, with this individual, right? Whereas the start, moving closer, you know, describing this closer, circling back, right? The hand that, or the head on the shoulder, right? We're doing concrete stuff, right? And then is it just me or you misreading the last sentence every time? I probably am. Perhaps this is not. Perhaps this is worth not rushing. Yeah. Anyway, concrete, concrete, concrete. Actually, this whole opening is concrete, right? Which, you know, sort of is nice, right? We establish with this concreteness, we get a little uncertain, we expand a little bit, and then we end on that openness. That's cool. Doesn't really matter. I thought I was going crazy. Yeah, I misread things a lot. I think this is just like the nature of being a human. Probably, right? That we misread things and that's okay. Um, and reading out loud and reading this much text. Of course, I'm also doing it with a camera on my face. Um, but yeah, we misread things. And I don't think misreading something is something we should consider necessarily to be a mistake, because like misreading happens. Oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, yeah. Um and you know, everyone misreads things all the time. And when we misread, this is another thing. There are many things as we read, but this is something that, contributes to the subjectivity of a poem, right? Everyone experiences a piece of art differently. Everyone experiences every single moment of every day differently. And misreading, I think, is sort of beautiful, right? Because it it creates an experience that is more unique, a more unique, um, uh, a more unique experience, artistic experience for the person doing that misreading. I just found it interesting how a single word, misread, does change the poem very much. Yeah, perhaps this is not worth rushing. Perhaps this is worth not rushing, right? We're creating positive worth or negative, not worth, right? It's not worth rushing is to say that, I don't know, it would be bad to rush, right? Worth not rushing is saying it would be good to not rush. It would be good to slow down. Um, and I think part of the reason I love this line so much is that the more, like, worth not rushing, worth not. So much more often in our lives do we say something is not worth it, right? This is not worth it to do. This is not worth it to do. This is not worth it, right? We're like de-worthing in our lives. And then this line says something is worth not doing. And I think it's much, much rarer in like common English, sort of lexicon to say worth not, right? Perhaps this is worth not rushing. And I think that really um, makes the lines stick out really strongly. And then also, right, it flips on its head this idea of like not worth and not worth, which is usually the mindset of rushing and modern life and all of that. Um, we talk about the things that are worth it and the things that are not worth it. But very rarely in like modern day times do we talk about the things worth not doing, right? The value of slowing down, the value of doing less. So it just works so well on like many levels to me. There's a bunch of things in chat that I just didn't read. That Bukowski interpretation was spot on, disregarding all the bad stuff about him. I actually got very inspired by his formatting style. Yeah, Elias Bukowski was the first poet I ever read, and he is still probably the poet I have read the most of, just in terms of like number of poems I've like analyzed and spent a considerable amount of time with. And this, and I don't quite understand why it all matters. It just sounds so Bukowski. And Bukowski has this way of of, you know, in this same way, like zooming in very closely on like moments of his own life. And sure, he does it in like a much crasser, cynical kind of way. But this really does feel like a more peaceful, more kind, um, more, compassionate spin on like Bukowski's writing and style. And that's extremely refreshing because Bukowski is unpleasant, right, in much of his subject matter, and he's like objectifying like women and sometimes like girls, not women. So this is really nice. It edges confessional and crosses into feeling biographical. Yeah. Yeah, it right, confession is this feeling of like pouring out of one's own emotions. And we get some of that pouring out in like the end, right? We get some of that pouring out in perhaps this is worth not rushing, right? That's a very like emotional phrase. Or like talking about, you know, I like you, but I don't want to burn you, being calmed, these like moments of care, right? These have a confessional feel because we're digging into like the emotion. But much of this really is like recounting simple everyday beauty, just things happening. And that's not really confession, right? Telling you about my day is not confession. Confession involves like the the emotions, the here is my heart on my sleeve, right? So I think that's a great way to describe this poem. Slightly confessional, but very biographical. Um, I like that. Yeah. Um. Um. I keep putting my pencil on the side of my iPad, and then it's hard to get off. Okay. Sorry for the sidetrack. No, no. Sidetracks are good, I think. Just generally. I mean, sometimes we get a little excessive with the sidetracking, but that one was pleasant. This was a nice thing to say, and this was a nice thing to clarify. So you're good. Um, right. Again, a classroom where we can get sidetracked and have side conversation and side whatever, and where you don't have to pay attention, or you can pay attention, or you can just put stuff in chat, um, participate freely, right? Already late and still halfway packed for leaving. That See, that's also like Bukowski and Jam Mints. Um, already late and still halfway packed for leaving, but drawn in anyway. We lingered for, yeah, yeah. So for those who are not familiar with Charles Bukowski, because it's not very like helpful to talk about this guy when y'all like haven't maybe read him as much as me or Elias. Um, there are like a few things to me. So Charles Bukowski, he was an American poet, uh, in basically active probably from the 60s to the 90s. That's probably his writing period. Maybe a little earlier. Maybe he started writing in the 50s, I'm not sure. Which made him like a beat poet, but sort of like a later beat poet inspired by beat poetry, much later than like Ginsberg and those kinds of types, right? Um, but that's sort of his movement. He was West Coast. He was L.A. Um, And Bukowski, for me, as like having read him a lot, is very blunt. Is like one stylistic thing to know about Bukowski, and that's that he talks about the realities of life, right? He, in Nicky's word, he's very biographical, right? He yeah, classified as a beatnik, as a beat poet. Um, um, Very blunt. He just talks about life. He talks about pigeons in LA. He talks about going to buy avocados. He talks about, um, sex plainly. He talks about his dead wife as his dead wife. Like in wording, also in topic. He talks about homeless people on the streets of LA, these kinds of things. He's just talking about like the world, right? And this poem is very similar, where it bluntly, in a sense, describes life. Bukowski works a lot, I think, with suspense, particularly in his enjambment, which is line breaks, where he'll break his lines like this. Already late and still halfway packed. For leaving, but drawn in anyway, we lingered for one last song. Where the breaks in the lines really have this way of like pushing into the next one. This is like a very Bukowski kind of thing, right? And I don't quite understand. Maybe that's why this sticks out so much as being like him. And I don't quite understand, right? And if you stop there, you're waiting, you're hanging on to the word because you want to know what they don't quite understand. This is like extremely Bukowski. He's blunt. He does this suspense thing. Those are two big stylistic things. Another thing is his first lines. He's like a master of the first line, I think. But these are at least two qualities of Bukowski that like translate over to this poem. I think he's worth reading. He is, if you get over his crassness and his misogyny. Anyway, I feel like we've lingered on this stanza for long enough that I think we'll get more value by looking at other parts of the poem now. So we'll jump to something else. I don't know if any one of you in chat has one of these that like jumps out to you. We could go to the first one, right? Go to the end and then the start and then the middle. We could go back to the third. We could go to the second. Anyone is free to just call out a stanza we go to next. I find the wording still instead of only again makes it feel more positive than it would usually be worded. Still. Already late and still halfway packed for leaving. Like, yeah, only sort of points to the fact that, they should be fully packed, but still packed, still halfway packed, says, this is where we are, right? This is our present moment. And at some point we'll be more packed. We've been halfway packed for some time since we are still halfway packed. I think that word that word does a lot of lifting in like the tonal feeling of this line. And I think these individual little word choices do so much for creating this feel, this, lived in feel, this open, this simple feel, right? That we're sort of subverting the regular language of motion, the regular language of like only halfway packed, we should be packed. Worth not instead of not worth, right? just using a word like lingered, right, is just a very fitting, you know, word choice here. For one last song, one where we could dance together, just in case. Right, and I don't quite understand. Does this same kind of thing of pondering slowly, like we might understand at some point? It almost points to the fact that we get some understanding at the end. Um, why it all mattered to me so much. Right, mattered so much to me. Mattered to me so much. These are two very different phrases, and I think, again, like, the word choice here mattered to me, right? It's about that it mattered to me. It's very personal. So much. Added on, you know, like modifier more. Where if it was like mattered so much to me, I think it's different, I guess. A lot of these choices are really doing a lot here, I think, for the tone. Second stanza, to get away from that one a little bit. You allowed me to move closer, perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way, but even then I was circling back into it. Into you. Again, almost unconsciously, close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder, and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? I like you, but I do not want to burn you. And there's some like, uh, uh, this is a very clever stanza. We have this like repetition thing going on. You allowed me to move closer, and we come back to like allow me here. All the way, all the way. You know, but closer than, but even then, right? We have these like these repeated structures going on with slight changes throughout this second stanza. You allowed me to move closer. Perhaps we're doing this perhaps again. Like perhaps happens all through this poem. Perhaps is one of our big sort of linguistic through lines. I don't know if we have perhaps in the start, but maybe that makes sense because this is our most like grounded stanza. No perhaps. Interesting, right? Anyway, so we have these repeated words in this section, right? We have this I mean, repetition, specifically in a section that is talking about the idea, right? I was circling back into it, right? What did I just do? Okay, there we go. I was circling back into it, right? We have the sort of round and round feeling, right? Getting closer, not all the way, a little closer, moving back, forward and back, circling. And as we're doing this, we're like repeating these words in that like we circle back to allow me. We circle back to these ideas, and that's really cool. It's like self-referential in a sense, right? Calming with a blow, burn you. Yeah, we do have some like sexual like mentions in this poem, certainly, which is important to talk about, right? Um, but we'll get there when we get to the first stanza, I think. But even this stanza, very well in this sort of circular back and forth feeling, it could tonally relate, right? You allowed me to move closer, perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way. But even then, I was circling back into it. Into you, right? We have this, like, into you all the way, right, kind of stuff. Again, almost unconsciously, right? We're talking about this, like, attraction, this pull, definitely, as we're, like, in this stanza. So that is important. I laid my head on your shoulder and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? I like you, but I do not want to burn you. Right. Muffin is a reference to the more agreeable part of the lower back of a person. Interesting. I've never heard that used. Right. I guess we have, like, caked up, right? Is a modern vernacular term that feels quite similar, right? Just in terms of using baked goods to describe parts of someone's body. um, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say about this. There's something about this poem. There's a lot of things about this poem that are very hard to put to words. Um, that are very difficult to put to words. And I think part of it is that it is just doing this very, like, biographical thing and just telling this story in a beautiful way. And there's an impenetrability in just, like, talking about the things that happened, right? um maybe is a good way to put it, where this poem doesn't necessarily invite the reader in, um because it just, like, takes us along on the way, and it tells us a story that we can kind of, like, make our own associations with, and our own interpretations on top of. But at the end of the day, it's just about, like, this thing that happened, and it was a, like, beautiful, here you go, right? And I don't know, maybe this is, like, the feeling that had me very like, stumped, kind of, about this poem, is that it is just, like, so true to that immediate experience that it almost, like, alienates the reader in this weird way, and it's very powerful. I say that in a way that is meant to, like, really be a compliment to what this poem is doing, right? um but I don't know what it is that necessarily creates that feeling, and I mean, that's analysis, right? Notice the feeling and try to uncover what exactly is happening to make that feeling happen, so we can go as artists, try to capture that feeling ourselves, or try to do something similar in our way, learn from it. um I don't know I'm trying to say words. I This is the reality of reading stuff and interpreting art, is you don't always have the words, but you do have feelings, And that's like the vulnerability of analyzing is trying to express what the expression is making one feel. um you allowed me to move closer, perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way. But even then, I was circling back into it, into you again, almost unconsciously. Close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder, and I wanted you to notice. There's kind of more, I think this stanza like demands more energy. You allowed me to move closer. Perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way. But even then, I was circling back into it, into you again, almost unconsciously. Close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder, and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? It has this, like, tension and release to it. I don't know what it is about this poem that both times reading it, it's hard to put it in words. Um, but this stanza does have this like sort of pattern to me where it's split in two. Um, and we have like it starts out kind of calm here, and then it grows more tense, and then it releases right into almost unconsciously, and then it starts calm, right, close enough, head on the shoulder, and then we have this tension of these two questions, and then we have like a release of this sort of like answer. This feels very musical to me, because this is how music works. This is how I understand music. This is how I've been taught about music and musical lines, right? Is they build tension, they create tension, and then they kind of come down from that tension, right? And even then, even like within like the scope of this whole poem, right, we have less tension here, and then we sort of build tension as we get into some of this like sexual intimate kind of stuff, and then we like release back down at the end in like that questioning of value and meaning. um and and I think that's very cool, that like this structure is happening. It gives it feels like we go into it, something happens, and we land on the other side, right? This is like the structure of a story. This is very narrative, um in our, but it's also non-linear, which is very cool. um I'd say the point of view of this poem is messing with me. It doesn't seem gendered as much as I expected. Yeah, this poem does an incredible job of not feeling gendered, right? Um, like, it's just I and you. And I think the way that the people, the characters in this poem are, they don't feel like characters, right? A character, I think, like being a character has this connotation of being like dramatized, and that a character in some way is different from a human, right? And a character in a story is someone more dramatic, or someone where we're focusing on these very specific story elements. We're taking away humanity often by making something into a character. But in this poem, like they don't entirely feel like characters. They really do feel human. And I think so much of that is describing I, right, with this really honest level of like human uncertainty, and this sort of comedy, with this, great description of how intimacy is this tension, release, push, pull, confusion, right? this sort of like expressive exclamation points, questions. We're covering like such a broad range of human experience. And we're also not, even though we're talking about things very much implying like sexual, right? We're not sexualizing. And I think at least societally, it's very common that like women fall into the role of being sexualized. Um, Unfortunately, right? That it's often like a masculine gaze looking at the feminine body, right? And but in this poem, I think when we're describing the body, looking for constellations and markings on your skin, when we're talking about hands, when we're talking about this circling and head on shoulder kind of stuff, it doesn't objectify either individual. And it really, I think, does an incredible job of respecting, like, if these are two actual people, then this poem does an incredible job of respecting both of those people, um, which is very impressive because I think often in poetry, like if this is autobiographical, if the I is, someone somewhat analogous to Elias, um, I think poets have a way of like self-deprecating a lot and not necessarily respecting themselves or their own emotions, and even when in a confessional state, like um, sort of dramatizing for the camera. Um, and I wonder um, how often writers truly like respect themselves in a work of poetry. But this poem is just like so kind. It's very compassionate to like everything involved in it. Um, and I think that should be taken as a very big compliment. I don't think that's seen often. I'm gonna read some of your comments, y'all. uh, I found my old comment too. What stuck with me was almost a comedic detachment in the Gemini stanza, and their excitement over the biggest constellation, barring like Orion, and that led me back to STOP, Worth Not Rushing, and your favorite music. Is that why I felt sad? Does the subject regret having gotten that close? Yeah, this poem isn't like entirely happy, right? Like, I mean, maybe that's part of why it feels so real, right? Like, why does this poem feel so real and like is a great question. But there is some stuff that feels, right, a little bit sad. And maybe the worth not rushing is like a letting go. You have this like STOP, like slowing down. Um, you have, you know, like things feel melancholic and then things feel happy and then things feel uncertain and then things feel certain and then um, things feel compassionate and kind and calm and things feel beautiful. Um, right, and then things feel like off, and then they feel wrong. Armor, right? It feels wrong. I mean, we even say it feels wrong. And then it, like, there's actually so much feeling wrong, so much questioning in this poem. But then there's also like the acknowledgement of all of that as like a maybe kind of sort of beautiful thing, right? And that's so much more honest, I think, than a happy poem or a sad poem. because I think it does engage with like the complexities of being a person, like among other people, that it isn't so straightforward. I just dropped the end of my Apple Pencil. Now I have to find it, which is annoying. It like screws off for some reason. I guess so you can replace it when it gets like worn down. Uh, but it's really tiny, and it screws on and off, right? It screws on and off, so I fidget with it and then I drop it. Um, um, Almost like it's a conversation, and not every stanza is from the same person. That is a whole another interpretation, which is very possible, right? When we just have, I mean, this is something that can be really valuable as analysts. You know, again, I mean, we were talking about characters already, but to like define those characters, who is I? Who is you? And it is a big assumption that we make to assume that I is the same I and you is the same you, right? These things very much can change. I think usually, if we are changing, if this oftentimes, we'll do something to signal that, right? I think I wouldn't jump to assuming that the author is like switching around perspectives, because that's just not like intuitive for the reader, right? But it's possible. I think it's worth considering, and I'll look and see if I notice anything that sticks out to me in that way. I'd like to point out the word armor in the second stanza. I believe it's consciously mixing armor and amour, which means love. It does have that like implication slightly, right? OU is just like the British English spelling true. But yeah, I mean, words are similar to other words, right? This is just inevitable in language. And there's armor is very similar to amour. Armor we forgot we were wearing, right? It if it puts that in your head, then that's valid interpretation. Feels like the nervousness of first love when you don't feel worthy of love returned. I think there's like some feeling of that, but I wonder, like, to me it's almost like it doesn't feel like first love, right? Like, it does feel like certainly the first thing with this individual, but it feels more complex, it feels more nuanced than first love to me. And maybe it's just an incredibly nuanced look at first love. But it strikes me as having more of an understanding of like the mechanics of love than someone doing those things for the first time. If you're comfortable answering, what is your interpretation of I do know you? Is that do I know you, or is it I do know you? Is that one of like the non-linear reading parts? I don't know. You asked me about it last time, and I thought I've racked my brain all week, but I'm not going to answer. I had a history of talking with this person about very deep topics, but we haven't actually met in person until right before this poem. So there was this glass wall between us somehow. This difference, this non-depth that was always present. That's interesting. Situation changed. Is now playing Love is in the Air. Yeah. Multiple subjects is very possible, but it doesn't feel text supported. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, text supported is really a really useful tool we have as analysts. Like, we can speculate about things infinitely, right? I could imagine that this poem is actually describing um, uh, two birds, not people, they're birds. Um, and these birds are doing all of these things. There's nothing in the poem that suggests to me that these aren't birds. I guess they have hands, so it's like anti-supported textually, so it's not a great example. But there's nothing in the poem to tell me this is about birds, so one should be hesitant to just like add on something like there are perspective shifts because the text doesn't necessarily point toward those things. Um, yeah. I once suggested in math class that the graph doesn't need to use time on the x-axis, and this was met with a counter-argument that it's universally standard unless textually deemed not to. Yeah, exactly. And and this is sort of like the convention of writing, right? That we there are conventions of language that I is going to stay I through a piece. And if there's nothing telling us that I has changed, we should probably assume that I is still I for our own sanity. For shorthand, at least, so we're not reconsidering it every time, driving ourselves insane. Um, but maybe I should make a language. I like conlanging. Maybe I should make a language where like that is not a fundamental assumption of the language. That'd be a really cool thing to mess with. Um, anyway, we're gonna take a brief break from this poem because there's an ad, but also because we should stand up and move our bodies and rest our minds from poetry. That's always a good thing. Coming back with a fresh brain, fresh eyes is always good. So we will return in 3 minutes. Get some water, stretch, go to the bathroom, get a snack, take care of yourself. Looks like y'all want me to stretch during the break. Um, it's just convenient because the camera will be off. Um, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Yeah. Ba, 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 ba. I'm back. Welcome. Welcome back. To myself. I did not actually stretch during the break, so I'll stretch my neck now. At least do the basic left and right neck stretches. This is genuinely my favorite stretch. Just to go to the left, go to the right, and just let the neck like do its thing. It is so like uh beautiful. Um I really I gotta get a different chair. I gotta get a chair where I can sit in lotus, because then my posture would be more upright all the time. Uh Lotus is like the fancy cross leg yoga one where the feet are on top and it looks kind of pretzel like. But it doesn't really work on the chair that I'm on. I will also reach to the sky. This is definitely the second best stretch. High key, just going up. Yeah, I need that chair you showed me, Nikki. That's true. Ah, extend the spine, because everything. Um, what I'm doing with this one is I'm taking my hand behind the back and grabbing my foot, which you can't see, which is fine because I don't think I need y'all to see my feet on stream. This is a great stretch too. Pulls the shoulder. I can also grab both feet behind my back at the same time, but y'all can't see. That like opens up all of this. Um, Neck, back is pretty much the most important things for stretching, because like everything else with posture is happening there. I mean, definitely like legs and stuff, because that's like I'm gonna do a back bend. um oh, my scarf fell off. No. Okay. Now I get messy hair. Okay. um Tragic. Tragic. Yeah. Okay. um yeah, back and neck helps everything, right? I have that weird tension between the meaty part of my index knuckle and thumb knuckle. I don't know a stretch to help that. I've heard that like I have a friend who types a lot and that he was like building up that muscle, and he noticed after like a lot of typing that that was like noticeably larger and stronger. I wonder if that's from typing, from like this kind of thumb spacebar motion, or like this kind of motion. Um, but I feel like I do some hand stretches because I rock climb and I play saxophone, and I need to not have my hands get injured for both of those things, right? Because that. Um, so like a hand thing, hand stream. Oh my gosh. Um, I love just like lifting fingers. uh, this isn't like necessarily like a stretch where it feels like you're like super stretching anything out, but I mean, if you rock your arm forward, this gets harder to do. Where like if your hand is kind of flat, this is pretty easy. But if is just that like I guess I like this one. Make a fist, pull it down. Um, right. Make a fist and pull it down, and then like pull it back up and like open all the way, trying to keep it up here. That's sort of a stretch. Um, did stream drop for a second? Oh, stream did drop there. Oh, man. Stream did drop. Okay, well, we're back. Hand stretches. We were talking about hand stretches. Not a big deal. Always frustrating though. Um, yeah, there aren't that many good hand stretches that I've found. The ice packs ain't working good enough. I think it's a network thing. Um, my mom just got home, so she's probably on her computer, and uh, my sister might have just gotten on her computer too because she was in the shower and now she's not. So, all of that. Long time no see. I'm so excited. Hello, Blood of Lotus. It has been some time. Um, this is how you stretch the occipital muscle. Major cause of tension, headaches. Can also do the sides. Oh, giving me yes, yes, Nikki. That is also a top tier stretch. Just going like down, pulling on here. Not so much that you'll hurt yourself, right? Just enough that it's like tension. And then something that I like to do, more so when I'm like not in a chair, but it can work here, is to like bend the back and go down, and then like straighten back up, and try to like really straighten the back. Great stretch. Big fan of that stretch, Nikki. That is a great neck stretch. I love stretching. That's part of why I like the stretch redeem is I get to talk about stretches because stretching is very important. But this is not a stretching Twitch channel. This is a poetry Twitch channel. Yeah. Also, Blood of Lotus. There was like probably a stream notification that I just went live. It was actually that stream just crashed, and came back. So we're like halfway into this poem already. So welcome in. I'm sure you'll catch up. But we are going to read the whole poem again. We are going to read the whole poem again, and then maybe we will dig closely into these two stanzas that we have not dug closely into. Or we'll just talk broadly now. I'm not sure. We'll see. I have about an hour left maximum to stream. I had a pretty bad cervicothoracic sprain. I nailed that. So the occipital stretch and I became extremely cozy. Yeah, it's a great stretch. Okay. Muffins on the Way Back Home by Elias. Elias P. or Alicia Lore. I met you as a half-coffee stranger cooking in my too large kitchen. Someone I do not actually know. But it feels wrong. I do know you. There is armor we forgot we are wearing. I want to scratch it. Break it down. It wasn't there in the times we talked before. S-T-O-P. I am nervous. I'm anxious. I just felt your touch for the first time and your favorite music kept playing. How could you calm me with just a blow? You allowed me to move closer. Perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way, but even then I was circling back into it. Into you. Again. Almost unconsciously. Close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder, and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? I like you, but I do not want to burn you. Then later, your arm gently resting on my hands, stretched out between us, while I was looking for constellations and markings on your skin, neither of us moving at all. Perhaps scared the other will move away, with your hand in mine and mine in yours. Were you afraid I would leave? You seemed so very excited about the Big Dipper. Is it your favorite? I found Gemini for you, next to Jupiter. You mentioned your mother is a Gemini, too. Already late, and still halfway packed for leaving, but drawn in anyway, we lingered for one last song. One where we could dance together, just in case. And I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, and why you said you could not stay here with me. Perhaps I do know. Perhaps this is not. This is worth not rushing. Perhaps this is worth not rushing. That's such an easy mistake to reading it, because just not worth is so much more common. That's muffins on the way back home. Okay, so you had mentioned a second ago, Elias, that this is sort of describing a long distance thing, or someone you had only known online and then met in person, right? Haven't actually met in person until right before this poem. And this makes sense, right? This like still halfway packed for leaving, right? Drawn in anyway. One last song to dance together, right? And then like you can't stay here, so this person is sort of visiting from someplace, right? And then visiting from someplace, and then they have to go. They can't just stay, right? And so this pact is referring to like leaving for some time, and this is a very short sort of encounter between these two people. That makes sense, right? That definitely makes sense. Streamer, do you have any content planned for the very important holiday today? No, I do not. I do not. Or too serious here or something. I don't know what I would do. Okay, so I think I want to talk about the first stanza now, since we've talked about the second one. We've talked about the fourth one in like fairly considerable amount of depth, right? April Fools, I hate poetry, I hate analysis. Yeah, I could do April Fools and be really mean to someone's poem, but like that would be mean, you know? April Fools streamed analyzing Dr. Seuss. I feel like Dr. Seuss is like a serious I feel like Dr. Seuss is a literary icon. I feel like he was also like canceled a few years ago or something. That doesn't matter to me. I like Bukowski. I mean, I don't know. Like one could read like the Jabberwocky or something, right? Right, that's a poem. The Jabberwock, which is the one with all like the non-words. That's very silly. That would work for me. I'm horrible with compliments. Someone should try that sometime. Someone should submit a poem to me and say, I only want you to be mean. I only want you to talk about the things you don't like, and see how I do with that one. I would probably struggle, but you could try. Anyway, I met you as a half coffee stranger, cooking in my too large kitchen. Someone I do not actually know, but it feels wrong. I do know you. There's armor we forgot we are wearing. I want to scratch it, break it down. It wasn't there in the times we talked before. STOP. I am nervous. I'm anxious. I just felt your touch for the first time. and your favorite music kept playing. How could you calm me with just a blow? Okay, so I think what's happening is this stanza, these two are both the morning after, right? Is like how I read this, like chronologically, roughly. Um, and then, and then these two are both a description of the prior night, if we're talking about a one night thing, or these two are talking about just like nights in general, and then these are but these feel like the same morning, right? Because we're like signaling this textually. We're talking about, you know, the music that kept playing and the one last song. um we're talking about, right, the stuff that had happened the prior night, this referring to that. um that's how it feels, right? I'm not sure. Like this definitely also could feel like it like takes place over many days. Hard to know. Um I don't think it's necessarily like important or crucial to understanding the poem, but it is interesting to think about. Um Fun fact, Lewis Carroll invented the Vorpal sword. Yeah, he did, which is super cool. By the way, regarding the muffins, I actually made this person muffins before the person arrived. That's the background. Okay, gotcha. Um, Lewis Carroll and Dr. Seuss are masters of the neologisms. How do you say that word correctly? Neol? Is it a neolog or is it a neolo? Is it a neo? Y'all use this word sometimes. Newly coined word or expression. Neologism. Oh, neologism. New log. New thought. Newly coined. New logos. Okay, that's cool. Best I Do by Yali Kamara would be a cute April Fool's poem. Maybe 12 months from now, I'll do something intentional on April Fools, but it seems that it's too late at this point to do so. Um, yeah. What kind of muffins were they, Elias? I would love to know. So, okay, I met you as a half coffee stranger cooking in my too large kitchen. I feel like something you asked me last time, Elias. Chocolate. Excellent. I feel like something you asked me last time was like, um, what I find in this poem, like reading between the lines. I think that's a question that you asked when you originally sent this, and I sort of like didn't, and I sort of fell asleep while we were talking about it. Are you still interested in that? The sort of like constructing of the narrative and the constructing of what's happening, like beyond what's textual. Um, it's a really interesting thing to ask, I guess, is why I bring it up, because I think it's not something I usually think to do when analyzing poetry, because, right, I care so much about the textual and I care so much about noticing things on the page, and then like reading between the lines is sort of this act of inference that goes away from that, right? Um, and that's like a curious thing to do. And if you're still interested in that perspective, I think I might be misremembering. I might be thinking of something else. But I think you did mention before, um, reading between the lines. I'm also running out of things to say about this poem. I think the thing that maybe just sticks out to me most is what I was talking about um, during this stanza. Um, some of this like word choice impenetrable biographical stuff, and then this like tension release, this humanity, this compassion. That's the thing that sticks out to me most from this poem, um, is like the humanness. And we've read one of your poems before, and I probably said something similar about it. Um, but like, I mean, in this first stanza, right, like half coffee stranger, as to say like still waking up, or also like halfway through a coffee if we're talking about like a date maybe, right? Like too large kitchen, this sort of, we're all of these word choices like add so much to this feeling and this like detail of one's life. um don't actually know, but I do know you. This feels like that humanness, that not quite, that honesty, that truth. Um, and then this like scratch it, break it down, STOP, nervous, anxious, right? Like everything in this poem is very, very human. Is like my takeaway. And I think humanity is accomplished through detail and through not dramatizing and through not um, making the truth more or less than what it is. Um, and maybe that's also why this is reminiscent of someone like Bukowski, because it really is like as is, and it's impressive. You do it really well. Something I noticed when I read through the whole thing again is I got to like the third stanza. I'm just like talking now. I got to the third stanza. I'm like, man, this is kind of long. I don't know if I want to be here. Um, like, there's a part of me that feels like I'm not super into the third stanza, and yet, right, the poem sort of like spat that back at me when it comes to this is worth not rushing, right? And this is maybe what I mean when like the poem doesn't care about the reader. The poem is just saying its thing at its pace. Maybe it's a little too long, maybe it's a little too slow, but like I only say that because I felt it, and maybe it's because I've been talking about this poem for 2 hours now, right, or an hour and a half. Um, but the poem really like um, just takes its time. It just doesn't care, right? It just says like, and it's fascinating, right, that it doesn't care and is so compassionate, right? It's like it's gonna do its thing. It's gonna lay out its beauty and its sort of these perfect moments, these four meaningful things that matter so much and are full of so much emotion, right? Um, it's like anti Bukowskian, um, in like that's really special to me, right? Because you read Bukowski and you're like, oh, blunt is crass, right? Saying it as it is has to be this like sort of slightly perturbing beatnik thing. Um, but this like follows in that tradition while getting rid of all of the sort of nasty things of Bukowski. Um, I'm honing in on Bukowski because I love Bukowski. Um, and that makes me love this poem, um, for that honesty and for that sort of grittiness, but without being just gross, right? I've pretty much moved away from reading Bukowski because I just got tired of like his subject matter generally and the way he writes about people and the way that it's not very kind. Um, but this is like very much an answer to that, and I genuinely think like um, you're in the two things that I've read from you, which is a small sample size. Uh, I think you're doing something quite special. Um, like I deeply enjoy your work. Um, I think confession is the modern mode of poetry often, especially when we think of like popular poetry as slam. Um, which slam is like a really big part um, of what modern poetry is, but also just like insta poetry and all of these things. Um, Thank you for the bits, Blood of Lotus. That's very generous of you. Um, um, where and this poem doesn't engage necessarily with the like trying to make life more than it is. Uh, right? It's not rushing. Uh, as someone who really cares about not like I love this poem, Elias. Um, like I would like to be able to write poetry like this, you know. Um, Not just like it, right? I want to write in my way. I don't want to. I don't want to be you. Um, but no, this is rad. It's really rad. um, is that enough analysis? There's more to say. I encourage you all to go, like read this and read it more because I don't think I've said everything that I could say. Um, does anyone have questions about this? Do you have questions, Elias? The things that you would like to direct me to still within this work, outside context or clarification. Um, Anyone else having questions, things you noticed, analyses of your own, final thoughts? Um, yeah, I guess that's a question. Um, that is a question. But it seems like maybe y'all don't. Um, I'll give it another second. I'll take a long drink of water. All good, no questions anymore. Cool. I hope this was helpful to you, Elias. Um, um, there is like a Leon calls me out for imposter syndrome a lot when I talk about stuff. There is like this feeling that I like read people's stuff on stream and it's like not like useful or helpful, but I think it is. Like I have to remember, I have to like think about um I have to think about like if someone read my poem like this, I would be very, very happy no matter what. Um, I think there is the fact that I've never had someone analyze my work uh, to this degree. So I just don't know. Like it's weird. Like I actually don't know how it feels to be on the receiving end of analysis. Um, Truly. So weird. Um, Honestly, same. I want more effortless flow like this. Yeah, yeah, so good. But I also just need to write more. Yeah, I haven't been writing much. I wrote two like prose poems last night actually. Um, they they're something new. That's as much as I'll say about them. Um, I've said it before. I'll say it again. If your voice echoes mine, your voice echoes mine. So if you like my poetry, you should like your own. Right? Yeah. Um, We need to analyze your poetry in your stream, in like a Discord group call or something. We could. Um, it, I don't know how. If y'all want to do that, you might have to take some initiative. Because I'm not trying to organize the let's get together to look at my own work thing. I don't know. That just feels very like self-centered. Did you ever send Miserere to that writing professor we talked about like a year ago? To that writing professor we talked about. I don't know who I would have wanted to send Miserere to. Um, um, who would I have wanted to send Miserere to? The answer is probably not. Probably not. It was probably me talking. Probably me flapping my lips. Um, I don't like Miserere anymore though. Um, when I wrote it, it was the best thing I had written, uh, and I held on to it for a while as something I really really enjoyed. Um, and now I look at it and I think there are things that like it's good. It's still a good poem. There are things that could be improved. There are lack of clarity. There's some very powerful imagery. I succeed on that in that work, but um, I'm not so miserere pilled anymore. I'm gonna read this one more time. I guess. I guess. Can you send me a screenshot of my scribbles, my scrambles on Discord? Yeah, I can. I can just do that like right now, um, so I don't forget, cause I'm good at forgetting. Save to photos. We'll go to my face, and then we'll come back and we'll read it. Um, uh, dude, it just pisses me off so much that stream crashes and it sends a whole nother notification to everyone to like come to my stream. It's so freaking annoying. What am I doing? What am I doing? I'm sending you your thing. Uh, 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 Oh, it's in stream submissions. Duh. Okay. Sorry, I'm just like buffering on stream. Whoop. Okay, I sent it to you. I sent it in stream submissions. We'll read this poem again. We'll read this poem again. Ba-bam! Muffins on the way back home. I don't know why I said it like that. It's not that intense. Just not that intense. Um, um, you do know those scrambles just work at being both work of art and graphical as well as textual standpoint. Totally deserving of some kind of compilation. I do have a lot of them. Uh, that'd be an interesting art piece to to they all have different characters. Sometimes I'm really good with the color coding. Sometimes I'm really sometimes I have the graphs, right? Um yeah. Anyway, here's muffins on the way back home. I'll try to channel this poem. I feel like I haven't been reading it super well. I met you as a half coffee stranger, cooking in my too large kitchen. Someone I do not actually know, but it feels wrong. I do know you. There's armor we forgot we were wearing. I want to scratch it, break it down. It wasn't there in the times we talked before. S-T-O-P. I am nervous. I am anxious. I just felt your touch for the first time, and your favorite music kept playing. How could you calm me with just a blow? You allowed me to move closer. Perhaps not all the way, but closer than before. I was too scared to try all the way, but even then I was circling back into it, into you, again, almost unconsciously, close enough. I laid my head on your shoulder and I wanted you to notice. But what does this mean to you? How near will you allow me? I like you, but I do not want to burn you. Then later, your arm gently resting on my hands, stretched out between us while I was looking for constellations and markings on your skin, neither of us moving at all. Perhaps scared the other will move away. With your hand in mine, and mine in yours, were you afraid I would leave? You seemed so very excited about the Big Dipper. Is it your favorite? I found Gemini for you, next to Jupiter. You mentioned your mother is a Gemini, too. Already late, and still halfway packed for leaving, but drawn in anyway, we lingered for one last song, one where we could dance together, just in case. And I don't quite understand why it all mattered to me so much, and why you said you could not stay here with me. Perhaps I do know. Perhaps this is worth not rushing. Muffins on the way back home. By Elias. Would make a great shirt to have one of these poems on a shirt. I guess so. I'd have to be careful printing people's poetry. I could do there's like the ones we've read of dead people, right? Like Walt Whitman, "Oh Captain, my Captain," right? That one, for example. But yeah. What is your favorite celestial body? Asking Elias. That's an important question. Any answer other than Uranus is wrong. Favorite celestial body? I feel like I would like to answer this question as well. I mean, I might have to bring it back. I might be an Earth kind of person, right? Like, Earth is beautiful, and Earth is the entirety of my life and existence and conception, right? Partial to Venus and the moon. That tracks. that does track. Venus is great. The moon's great too. There's a time where I would have probably said the moon. I want to look up. Yeah, what's the Heart Nebula? Heart Nebula. Here. Dude, that's so beautiful. Why the heck is space so cool, dude? Space is the place. I need Walt Whitman injected directly into my veins. I don't know if I would go so far, but maybe a little bit of Walt wouldn't hurt, right? Can I click on another image? Yeah. Let's see. That one definitely. Wow. Guys. That's like a detail. Man, space. That one's colored pink. Friggin' space. Space. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Space. Oh, cause stream crashed. There's an ad running. Man, that's annoying. Stream crashed like right after an ad break, and that means instead of running the ad after like an hour, ran it after half an hour. It's really annoying. I think I have to go anyway. I think stream has to end here. I hate that sometimes the ads make it difficult for me to drag out an ending. But I have to. I don't have to. I get to go hang out with my friend and help her fold zines. So that's good. Zines are good. So keep making art you love is the way I end streams. This is very unceremonious. This is very. I don't like unceremoniosity. The ad fucking ran too, so some of you don't even get to see this part. All right. God damn it. Have a good one.